Awesome. Okay, I think we will get going and we'll let everyone else kind of join in their own time. So just a quick introduction. I'm Laura, Associate Experience Design Director at FIS. Thank you so much for joining wherever you're joining from. Please continue to just use the chat as we go along. Leave us thoughts, views, questions. We'll have kind of 10 minutes or so to pick up any kind of key questions towards the end of our time in Zoom. And then we'll also head over into Slack for a wider Q&A. There'll also be kind of pauses throughout where any of your comments we can start to pull in and discuss. So please just use the chat. And then finally, just kind of a heads up as well that this session is being recorded. Hopefully no one has an issue with that. The transcript should be on also, and we will be sharing the recording with everyone that has signed up in the next week or so. So without further wait, I will hand over to the other Laura B to introduce herself and to kick us off for today's session.
Thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. I'm also Laura B, Laura Botsford, and looking forward to speaking to you all today. It's been a while since I've been able to speak to a group, and certainly even longer since I've spoken to a group as big as this. So I'm a little bit nervous, but hopefully I do a good job, and you'll have to give me some feedback at the end of the session as well. Really appreciate it. But yeah, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to head over to Mural. Because there's quite a large group, we decided that it would make most sense if I just talk you through the Mural. I will be sharing the link to this after the session, so you'll be able to come and have a look yourself, copy any of it that you want to, and you'll see when you come onto it just down here in the corner, I'm linking to resources. So all of the activities that we'll look at today, none of them are mine, they're all kind of best practice and public domain, so you'll be able to find templates of them in Miro and Mural and kind of a lot of other places as well, if you want to kind of go away and be able to do these with your own teams. But yeah, without further ado, we are looking at facilitating design decisions, and hopefully you're all here because you recognize the value of facilitating a shared decision. But I wanted to first talk about why I think this is an important skill to develop as a designer and within a team. I think sometimes we can struggle to bring people around to the way that we want to do things. So either, a particular design decision, or maybe it's on a product, or, maybe it's even about a project, but it can become quite an individually focused thing. We want people to recognize our expertise, or, kind of take our lead on a decision, and it can feel quite personal. I think this is a great way to kind of step away from that and make it about a team decision, but also there are lots of benefits to using these tools to consider a decision beyond it being a shared decision. Some of them I'm going to list through here. So these are some of my reasons for wanting to arrive on kind of collaborative decisions, but I have got a few empty post-its that you'll see. There are a few empty post-its actually for every activity for input from yourself. So if you have any kind of additions, any personal experiences, anything that I've missed or that you want to contribute, I would ask you to add it in the chat, and the other Lauras are going to do a fantastic job of sharing those and fielding them, and we will add your contribution as well, so that this is a collaborative session too. But yeah, why are we focusing on collaborative decision making rather than persuasive techniques or presentation techniques? We are hoping to unfold a wider range of experience and expertise. So you might be working in a team where you are working with other disciplines. You might be working with all designers, but every single person is going to have a different lived experience, and they're going to have different expertise than you. So hopefully what you're going to do is kind of try and synthesize that and arrive at the best decision with all of those things considered. We are looking to be collectively brought into the decision. So, if everybody agrees to what you want to do, that's great, but they might not kind of be as invested in that, versus if we've made a shared decision, we're all brought into, it's what everybody wants to do. We allow equal space for different ideas. So again, maybe there are different kind of dynamics or personalities within a team, and everybody doesn't feel like their way of doing things is fairly considered, but if we do it in this way, it's quite egalitarian, and we're allowing space for all of those different viewpoints to be considered. It also puts the focus on finding the best solution rather than kind of winning a discussion or being right. As I mentioned before, it sort of takes the individual out of the picture, which is nice. And if what you want to do is the best way forward. So you've kind of got a decision that you're kind of gunning for already, or you're hoping that it's going to come out. If it's the best thing to do, then that's going to shine through these activities anyway. So hopefully it is the best thing to do. And it's a framework for navigating disagreement as well. So if things become a little bit tense or a little bit heated, or you're finding it difficult to just agree as a team, some of these activities can be a good framework for navigating that and getting people to arrive at a conclusion. I'll pause there for a second. Did anybody have anything that they wanted to add about kind of collaborative making decisions or any points? I'm not expecting it to be that sharp right off the bat, but if there is anything, I'll add it in now, and I'll pause for a second.
There's nothing at the moment, but as we said, like, if you'd like to come off mute and contribute something, otherwise put it in the chat and we can fill it in later as well. But no, absolutely love what you've got there at the moment. I was trying to think of some others myself, but I think I'm a bit slow as well at the end of the day. So I think I'll add some maybe a bit later on.
Not to worry, guys. Okay, so we'll move on to looking at kind of our first scenario and task. Before we get started, I'm just going to invite you to enter a fictional world with me. So for each of these activities that I've got, I'm going to give examples so that you can see how I would run through and apply these different activities in this fictional world. Sadly, it is fictional. The Spice Girls are reforming and they're going to go on tour again, right? So all of the activities that I'm going to be running are with that in mind, which is going to make sense in a moment as we move to our first activity. So our first activity is the impact effort matrix. And it's a collaborative tool, it's a visual tool, and we look at how a particular task or item compares across impact and effort. One of the reasons that we might do that, so the scenario that we might want to use this tool in, is if our team doesn't have enough resource to be able to enact everything we want to do to the fidelity that we'd like to do it to. This is pretty much every project. I think I use this very often. So maybe there's not enough time, there's not enough budget, there's not enough kind of team members, or there are limitations. And this is a good tool to use to be able to help us decide what we're going to compromise on and where we best want to use our resource. Maybe it's picking our battles, maybe it's just kind of prioritizing tasks or compromising with other teams. So I'm going to use an example to show you how we use this tool. Again, this is quite a high fidelity version. I have drawn this on whiteboards. You just kind of need a grid. I've even made one on tables out of Post-its or spare pens, things like that. Don't worry about it necessarily being as well drawn out as this. But in our example, we are relaunching the Spice Girls. Between our team, the PR team, and the Spice Girls themselves, there have been lots of suggestions. There's loads of ideas for things that we want to do. We can't possibly do all of them, so we are going to compare and prioritize using this tool some of the suggestions that we have for relaunching the Spice Girls. Feel free to suggest your own items again if there's anything that you want to add as well, and the other Lauras will field that for me. But I'm going to get started. Can I just check the framing if that's okay? You can see both the grid and the Post-its there.
Yes, we can.
Yep. Cool. Okay, so the first suggestion that we have, and I've taken the liberty of pre-populating this so that we have some stuff to work with, but if you were running this with a team or in an activity, you would either get them to write down their own Post-its or interact with the board and kind of populate their own. That's the first part, but this is how you then use the tool. So first suggestion is rename. Maybe instead of Spice Girls, we become Spice Women. Okay. What is the potential impact of that, do I think? I think that's probably a pretty significant impact. I think there would be headlines. I think lots of people would have strong feelings about that. I don't know if it would impact Spotify or, how people would find the Spice Girls, but I think the impact would be pretty significant. I actually think the effort is pretty low. Yeah, maybe I put that down here. So high impact, low effort. What we're not doing, and this is a good caveat and a good example, is deciding if this is a good idea. Hopefully that comes separately, or you do that as a team. But this tool is just for looking at impact versus effort. It's not saying, okay, is this actually a good idea that everybody's bought into in the first place? Write a new song. Again, it's probably lower impact, and it's probably like somewhere in the middle of effort. Okay, like write a new song. Maybe it's a good song, maybe it's not. Press release announcing our relaunch. Cool. Okay, so that is probably lower effort. It's not going to take that long, right? Maybe it's going to take a day or two. But I imagine the impact would be really huge. There's going to be lots of press coverage. There's going to be lots of people talking about that. So that is a good activity for us to do. It is low effort and it is high impact. Worldwide tour. Okay, so we're going to go on a worldwide tour with the Spice Girls. That's high impact, definitely, but it's also like really high effort, right? Like that's a huge undertaking. So I'm going to put that over here. Jerry wears a new iconic flag dress. Presumably she picks a different flag. But slow effort, assuming that she can decide on a dress. Impact. This is the space where if I had other people on my team, we would have a conversation about the impact in different ways that we have to quantify it. So why we think it might be high, why we think it might be low. I think it's somewhere in the middle. You know, I think lots of people dress up in that iconic Union Jack dress over the years at Halloween and various things. Probably there would be coverage in various like fashion magazines or influencers and things like that. It's not tiny, but it's, you know, it's not as iconic as maybe some other things. Okay, re-release an updated version of Wannabe. It's low effort and it's probably quite high impact. Guest star on Drag Race. It seems like it would be fun. Low effort, but it's probably lower impact. I think there's probably a strong overlap with our existing fan base there. And then a London takeover. Going to take over buses, billboards, and Big Ben. That feels like high impact, but again, maybe it's like really high effort. Okay, I'm going to stop there, mostly because that is all my post-its. Before I explain this a little bit more, is there anything in the chat that we want to add in?
Yeah, we've got a few ideas here from Carla. So Carla's first one was around partnerships with organizations that fight for social justice or similar causes.
Totally optional, but Carla, would you be willing to volunteer whether you think that is high or low effort and high or low impact? Partnerships with organizations fighting for social justice.
I think that could be important for high impact these days. Just any artist or group that can show what are their beliefs or any type of mission, I think have high impact.
I agree. I think it's high impact, and having worked on some celebrity partnerships in the past, I think it's medium effort. It's not low effort, but hopefully the partnerships team would do some of the work there. So I'm going to sit that over in the middle. Any other suggestions?
We have another one from Carla if you want to stay on. Carla's second one was a podcast or social channel where the Spice Girls can reconnect with the fans, new generations, social groups, and or minorities.
Yeah, I just find this very interesting because these days social media is a great platform to share your mission, philosophy, and any type of statement. And I would say it's low effort because everybody can create an account. And also it's a great way, especially this last generation, it's a great way to connect with different audiences.
Okay, so we think it's low effort. And then in terms of impact, so I'm going to put it a bit lower down because I don't think it would have comparatively as much impact as the press launch or them renaming to Spice Women. But I think that's probably maybe in line with somewhere around here, right? Like it's high, but it's not as high. And again, we would have a very diplomatic conversation. We would agree our relative rating and everybody would be happy. I'm making myself queen for a day, making all the final decisions here, but there would be more of a conversation. So this is what we have. We've gone through and we've looked at our backlog of ideas or the different things that we want to do. We've mapped them according to how much effort they're going to take and how much impact they're going to give us, assuming that we do a good job. Now you can see I've kind of got little labels in each of these squares, right? So the things that are high impact and low effort, great. They're quick wins. We should look at doing them, assuming they're not terrible ideas. We should look at doing them pretty quickly. So we should get that press launch out. We should rename, if we're going to rename and update people there. We'll record a new version of Wannabe, and we'll get Jerry wearing a new iconic flag dress. Then over here, we've got things that they're high impact, so they're potentially still really worth doing, but they are higher effort as well. They're not just quick wins. We can't just go ahead and action them. We need to maybe make them a project, or look at how we're going to prioritize those over a given amount of time. Down here, we have, okay, maybe they're not as impactful, but they're low effort as well. So if we have time, we'll do these. We'll kind of fit them in. If you're, for example, like if you're working in sprints, if you have spare time in the sprint, or, you know, if you're working more flexibly, if you have the time to do these things, maybe you'll consider doing them. And then here, okay, if I was a little bit meaner on this so that we've got something there, forget it for now. If it's high effort and it's low impact, then we're not worrying about that for the time being. We're parking it, okay? I can see there's more in the chat. So are there any questions on this before we move on to, we've got another couple of matrices to look at quickly before our next activity?
Yeah, maybe we could jump in with one question from Afsa. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. Actually asked, you mentioned earlier on this exercise that it isn't about deciding whether it's a good step to do. I think you said, is it a good idea, is it a bad idea? So the question is, would you recommend doing a pass through the steps first to sense whether it's a good idea or a bad idea before doing this exercise?
Yeah, so it depends on the team and the task. So I would say, for example, I mean, in this scenario, you probably have lots of very, very hot-headed stakeholders, and everybody feels very strongly. I would do this first to kind of to cull the ideas that we don't even need to worry about, right? Like the ones that are going to come down here, or if we have time, so that we are only looking at the ones that we're saying, okay, we think these are really high impact. Now we can invest in the kind of potentially more contentious discussion of, is this a good idea? Should we do this? I think you can do it either way, but if you have an environment where you know there's going to be a bit of a tense back and forth about if you should be doing something, you can save yourself half of the conversations down here by doing this activity first, if that makes sense. Okay. I'll move on to the next activity for now, but we've got space for any more kind of questions or clarity on the end. So just because we've got a bonus of some more matrices. So very similar activity, but you can use different values on the matrix depending on what you're looking at and kind of the outcome that you towards. So you've got Eisenhowers Matrix here. I guess it's called that because he invented it. This is looking at, rather than it being impact and effort, we're looking at urgency and importance. So how urgent is it? That is, it's time constraints. It's not importance. So do we need to do it quickly? Do we need to do it now? Versus how important it is that we do the thing. Okay, so this is useful for when you have too much to do. You know, you're trying to plan, or you're trying to maybe take some things off your plate. You map things on, yeah, it's urgent or it's important. So over here you've got it's urgent and it's important. Down here it's not urgent, it's not important. And unsurprisingly, you start with and prioritize the things that are both urgent and important. And for the things that aren't either, so you can decide either you delete those things, you're not going to do them at all, you're going to defer them, it's going to be a problem for another time, or you're going to delegate them. These two, so it's either urgent or it's important, you're going to have a mix of. So you're going to have to decide individually whether you're going to prioritize the things that are just urgent or just important, depending on what your workload is like and what else fits. But the main thing is these things, time sensitive and important, is what you prioritize. Sounds simple, but it can be a really good way to just kind of break down what your workload is and the things that you're worrying about and get rid of the stuff that just isn't important. And then this one is assumptions mapping. So this is more for user research, or when you're in a discovery phase, or when you're trying to help answer some design questions. So here we look at certainty and importance again. So how certain are we about a particular assumption or hypothesis? So I don't know, for example, I could have the assumption that original fans of the Spice Girls will pay to attend a concert if we relaunch, right? Like that's my assumption. How certain am I in that knowledge? Based on what? So I could say, okay, I'm fairly certain on that because we did a tour in 2007 and 80% of people who, you know, supported us in the 90s came to that tour. Completely made that up, but that's the kind of thing that I would say, okay, I'm quite certain in this. And it's really important because we had millions of fans back in the 90s. So, okay, so that's known and it's important versus something that is completely unknown, so we don't know anything about this and it's really important. With this, you would prioritize testing the things that are important and unknown. So yeah, the point is the things that you know the least about and they're the most important for the project. That's what you're going to start with. And then you're going to park or defer the things that are unknown and not important. And then the other two, there's a bit more of a detailed plan here because you're going to be kind of making a testing plan. Are there any questions or comments on these two before we move on?
I actually have a question I'd love to get your view on, maybe for other people as well. The urgency, for example, is very time sensitive. When you're looking at something like importance, how are you measuring importance? And it's important to who as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think if you're going to do this, if you're doing this individually, it can just be about your job role, right? So if I have a kind of a backlog of jobs to be done and I'm looking at this and it could be, okay, how important is it to me or to the kind of success of my job role? If you're doing it with a team, it could be how important is it to the project? So kind of comparatively, how important is it that this gets done? Or it could be to a particular stakeholder group. So really you're looking at the consequence of it not getting done and deciding how important it is rather than actually the importance of it being done. And then all of these things are there a sliding scale. So I do think it's good if you're working as a team to kind of frame this and make sure everybody's on the same page and you have a shared definition of what urgent and what important is. And then as you go through, like we did with the Spice Girls, it's relative. So you're kind of saying, okay, this is more important than that, which is a bit lower, and so on and so forth, rather than kind of giving it any sort of fixed score. It's just easier that way. But yeah, it's a good question. Does that answer it? Did you want me to clarify anything else, Laura?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Cool. Are there any more?
Sorry, I think we can go on and maybe come back to some of the others towards the end.
Okay, so the next exercise up here, this is circle of control. There's 3 circles. There's a circle of control, there's a circle of influence, there's a circle of concern, and there's the square of no concern, which gets a bad rap. That doesn't get mentioned at all. It's a visual tool. It's more popular in kind of psychology and counselling, but recently people are starting to use it for work, and I think it works really well. And it reflects the level of control that we have over a given item. So the scenario when you might use this, or when I've used this, is maybe the team have encountered a crisis. So something's happened and we're really consumed by it, or they're struggling to move past a particular challenge. And the tool helps you to organize the things that you're concerned about into actionable groups. So you would respond differently to things that you can control, things that you can influence, things that you're concerned about but you can't do anything about, and then things that you're not concerned about. So I'll just explain those in a little bit more detail. So the circle of control here, this is things that we, either as an individual or as a team, depending on who's running the activity, we have direct control over. So I have direct control over what I eat for breakfast, right? Like that is completely within my power to decide and to action. Then you have circle of influence. So maybe it's not completely within my power, but I can do something that will impact this, or that will influence the outcome of this. So maybe that is what my partner eats for breakfast. I can't ultimately decide that, but depending on what I buy and have in the cupboards in the kitchen, that's going to influence that outcome. And then concern. So this is something that, you know, you're interested in the outcome, but it's very far removed from you. So that might be the price of Kellogg's cornflakes. I'm interested. It's going to impact my decision, but there's absolutely nothing that I can do about that. And then no concern. I'm not interested in the price of bran flakes. I don't want bran flakes for breakfast. I'm never going to eat them. So very simple example, but we're going to use our Spice Girls example again to go through in a little bit more detail and see how this could help us. So the Spice Girls, we've just announced our tour, and then Girls Aloud have announced that they are also regrouping, and they will be conducting their own competing tour at the same time. We are in absolute crises. We're going to organize our concerns, and we're going to create an action plan. So here are some of the things that people have said they're concerned about. People are worried that people might choose to go to Girls Aloud instead of us. Okay, their tickets might be cheaper than ours. Their tickets might be more expensive. That could be bad for different reasons. And they're worried that Girls Aloud are better singers than Spice Girls. Okay, so we're going to break those down. People might choose to go to Girls Aloud instead of us. Why are we concerned about that? Okay, we are concerned because we might not sell all our tour tickets. We are concerned because that might limit income. Okay, so we might not sell all our tour tickets. It's definitely something we're concerned about. It's not something that we have absolute control over because we can't force people to buy our tickets, right? But it's something that we have influence over. How could we influence that? We could change the price of our tour tickets, right? Like if there are some that aren't sold at the end of the day, we could drop the price of those. We could run special offers. We could also, if we have empty seats, we could give them away. We could give them to charity. There are things that we could do. So I'm going to put that in circle of influence. I should have made this a different color. Okay, hang on, bear with me. I'm going to make these green, and I'm going to bring them all to the front so they don't disappear again like that one did. Okay, their tickets might be more expensive. That is not something that we can do anything about. So assuming that we've already set our ticket price here, their tickets might be more expensive. Okay, why are we concerned about that? That might make us look like we're not as popular as Girls Aloud. Okay, their tickets might be more expensive. We are concerned about that. We can't do anything about it. Sorry, everything's disappearing when I put it behind the okay. We might not look, hang on, bear with me 1 second, because I'm gonna, there we go. Their tickets might be more expensive. We're concerned about that. Obviously, it impacts us, but there's not anything we can do about it. What can we do things about? Okay, we might not look as popular as Girls Aloud. We could do something about that we can influence. We could do segments on loose women. We could speak directly to our fan base. There is stuff that we can do about that. So this is more for us to look at. People might choose to go to Girls Aloud instead of us. Yeah, okay, we're concerned about that, but we can't do anything about it. And it might limit our income. That's an influence. They are better singers than we are. Now, maybe this is a contentious point, but I'm going to say that is not a concern for us. I do not believe that the Spice Girls had to be good singers to be successful, and I don't think it matters that Girls Aloud are better singers than they are. So I'm going to put that in no concern. And then, okay, their tickets might be cheaper than ours. Again, we can't control that, but what can we control? Tickets, right? Like we can do a sale, we can discount, etc., like we said. So I'm gonna stop there. I think that's hopefully enough examples just for you to see what I'm talking about in how we quantify this. So things that we aren't concerned about, things that we're concerned about, but there's nothing we can do, these things that we can influence, and then these things that are directly in our control. The next step in this activity would be copy and paste the ones that are in control and influence very quickly over here, because what we want to do is put these into our action plan. Okay, so these are the things that either are directly in our control or that we can do something about. Limit our income. Okay, I think that's all of them. So as a team, we would then look at these and we would say, okay, the price of our tickets, that's completely within our control. So Girls Aloud have announced their tour. What are we going to do? We're going to look at the price of our tickets. We're going to have a conversation about what to do with the price of our tickets. Are we going to raise them? Are we going to lower them? Are we going to discount them? What are we going to do? Their tickets might be cheaper than ours. Okay, if they are, there are things that we could do about that. So we'll wait and see. We might not sell all our tour tickets. Okay, we already spoke about backup plan here, backup charity, traffic noise, or discount them. What else could we do? We could give them away as prizes, whatever, away as prizes. We might not look as popular as Girls Aloud. That's fine. If that happens, we're going to go on Loose Women. We're going to engage our base, etc. And then it might limit our income. We'll do another corporate partnership. Okay. Are there any questions or suggestions on here? I know, again, we've used a very fictitious account here, but it could be, it could be something's happened to the website, or something's happened with a competitor, or, some kind of PR crisis. But we first segment by whether we can control or influence, or it's just something that we're concerned about. And then from there, we take those and we look at, okay, what our action plan is and what we're actually going to focus on. So in this case, we're going to focus on the price of our tickets and what we could do to ensure that we still remain popular and we don't have any empty seats on our tour.
No, this is great. I've actually kind of seen this being used as well for just a kind of general requirements as well, just to kind of prioritize some. So saying, actually, all of these requirements, where have they come from? Which ones might we have the ability to influence or change? What is coming from a top-down policy, for example, that we've got very little control over, and we can push that over. We do actually have one question from Jessica on this. So Jessica said, whose perspective is the circle of control from? My own in the individual role, or do we do this for each stakeholder or as a group as a whole?
Yeah, so you can do this. I think that the exercise was designed originally to be for an individual, so for you to be able to look at what you can control, but I would use this as a team. So we're looking at this challenge as a team. What is within the possibility of our team to do? And you could consider it from different stakeholders, but really you want it to be quite binary, like, can we do anything about this, or can we not do anything about this? So I would include all the resources and kind of team members that you have available to you when you're considering that, if that makes sense. Okay. I will move on to the final activity, if that's okay. Just yell if there's anything else. Okay. Next activity is a little bit more interactive, but it's quite a fun one, I think. I've drawn a very, very high fidelity problem or project framing sailboat. Again, normally this would just be, kind of a Sharpie or, a draw tool. You just need a sailboat, some wind, an anchor, and like maybe an island or a few sharks. But you'll see these are optional depending on you're running the session with. But it's an interactive activity again, and it's to help the team frame a project or a new problem from different points of view. So what it's going to give you is this kind of zoom out big picture. Okay, here are the different components that we have to consider as we're looking at this project or as we're looking at this problem. It can also be another one for actually, okay, we're a little bit stuck, and this helps remind us of the big picture of what's going on. So yeah, we've gotten bogged down in our project. We're not sure what to do next or what our longer term plan is, and we need a holistic view of what we are doing. And there are 4 categories. You could probably get creative and add more if you wanted to, but we're going to look at what is the wind in our sails. So that is what are the good things that are happening, what's propelling us forward, what kind of assets or resources do we have that are going to take us to our goal, what are all of the positives. And then what's anchoring us? So what's holding us back? What are the kind of the things that are slowing us down or that we're struggling with. That could be resource, things like that. The shocks are, what do we need to watch out for? So what are the things that we say, okay, we know this is coming up, or this is a potential threat that might come up, or something that we have to be aware of. And then finally, our sunny island over here is, where are we trying to get to? So what does the outcome look like, or what's our vision? Again, it's quite open for your team to sort of input this, but I think that works well. Sometimes it's quite vague. So we'll zoom in. Again, just thinking about the Spice Girls and their tours. So some of the positives that I've used here are, they have a huge existing fan base. They have a big catalogue of music, right? These are both things that are going to help take us forward and make our lives easier. Some of the challenges, they gain on a bit. They can't do the dance routines that they used to be able to do. And actually, I'm going to also add here, maybe being cruel, but maybe the iconic flag dress doesn't fit anymore. I mean, don't tell Jerry how well I said that. So new music platforms, things have changed a lot. A lot of what we did wasn't designed for the way that music works currently now. And actually, I think some of the contributions earlier reminded me it's more important now to have a voice and opinion on, what should we say, national events, campaigns. Quite agnostic, the Spice Girls, so I think that's something for them to watch out for. Where are we trying to get to? What's the outcome that we're hoping for? We are hoping for a sellout 2023 tour and a Christmas #1. We'll be happy if we get there. This is pretty simple. I will admit it's pretty simple. We could have focused in and had much more detailed views here, but the way that you run this activity is one at a time, and you do it, if you can, it's quite nice to do it anonymously. So just give everybody some of the same post-its and then collect them in if you're doing it in person, or great if you're doing it on Miro or Mural or similar, you can just have that be entirely anonymized. So you probably end up with, kind of 15, 20 post-its around each of these, give people time to work through. And then what we do is we have a conversation. So again, we start by looking at the positives and reminding ourselves what our strengths are, what our challenges are, what we need to watch out for, and what we are trying to get to. Hopefully that collectively helps kind of refresh us, but it helps also to revisit if we have a backlog or an impact effort matrix or things like that, and we're looking at, we can realign those with this, and that can hopefully help take us forward. This is the last of the 3 activities that I wanted to share with you. So I'll pause for if there are any questions in particular about this one. And then next, just going to have a little bit of a conversation about facilitating, so about running these kind of activities, and a few kind of common themes or challenges that come up as part of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no specific questions about this at the point of time, but please kind of ask them if you've got it. I really thought this was interesting, actually, because I've seen this being used as more of a retro exercise rather than a project planning. So it's quite nice to see how the exercises can kind of be used for different purposes. But actually, in terms of kind of moving forward to the next topic, maybe this can bridge it in. We have a question from Anika early, who said, who typically facilitates these activities, or is it more of a group?
No, so you do, you need a facilitator. I would encourage designers or people who work in design to try and take on that role, because I think it bridges very well with sort of design thinking and the skill sets that you'll want to build. But you don't have to. I mean, there might be somebody else in the team that kind of naturally facilitates your meetings, and this could be something that you would share with them. But I would hope the intention for running this session is that you feel personally empowered to be able to go away and facilitate some of these. And like I said, there will be kind of templates that I'll share with you, as well as obviously answering any questions. You can have your facilitator be somebody from within the team. I think that works fine. I think bringing in an external facilitator, that's normally kind of big organizational level stuff. You can just offer within your team to run the session, and you can still input, as I have. You have to watch out for obviously not overly favoring your own input in that. So like I said, when you are doing inputs here. So say, for example, what do we need to watch out for? And then I would just add loads of post-its here and have people anonymously fill them in, including myself. I add my own input, and then what you do in your role as facilitator is you go through each one and you sort of facilitate the discussion. So there would be other people's suggestions here as well. I would talk through them, and I would also talk through my own contribution of new music platforms, depending on the dynamic within your team. So if there is a good psychological trust, everybody's happy, there's not any tension, I quite often would just ask people to talk through their own points if they're happy to. Okay, so who said this, are you happy to explain it to us? If it's not, that's your job as a facilitator, so you do that and you talk through and just ask if anybody wants to add anything. It makes sense. Sorry, zoom way out and back in again, super jumpy. It makes sense here to just move over to, I've called facilitation finesse, because I love alliteration, and talk about that. What I haven't added, and I will add now, is tips for facilitator. Oh my god, I can't see that. Facilitator. I'll spell that right later. So what did we say there? We said don't overly favor your own contribution. And we said, what else did we say? I'll remember that later. Okay, I'll come back to that one. But so I wanted to talk to you about a few key things that we mentioned in the agenda, but then obviously any more that we'll kind of talk about as part of the Q&A, I will integrate as well. One of the important things when you're running any of these activities collaboratively is balancing personalities. Obviously, some people will be kind of more extroverted or more introverted. Some people might be more vocal or more willing to kind of push forward their own ideas. Equally, some people might be more critical of others. So there are some easier ways to do that. One of the most important elements that I just mentioned before is, I would call it working together alone. So that is, as part of the session, you divide it up and you kind of say, okay, you've all got your post-its or access to the board or whatever. We are now going to take 5 minutes to write down all of the things that we think about X. So you're all together, but you individually are contributing your points, and then those points are all going to be equally taken across into the board and discussed. So that just means that, as I say, everybody's contribution is taken in there, and being able to do it individually minimizes some of the impact of those kind of louder or more vocal personalities. There's also a tool called the 6 hats, which I'll link to in the resources. That's quite popular with facilitators. So 6 colored hats. You don't have to have the actual hats. You might if you want to go really far with it, but we've always just done it with like post-its or reminders. But basically, the 6 hats represent 6 different ways of thinking about a problem. So for example, there's a yellow hat, and the yellow hat's job is to only be positive and see kind of all of the best things. And then, there's a blue hat, and their job is to be analytical and just ask, well, how does this work? Or what would the questions be? Don't worry too much about the details, but it's something that you can look up if you think you'll be facilitating, and that's something that you want to learn more about. It can be a great way just to, if there's somebody who's overly negative, you get them to be that kind of yellow hat, and it's their job to find all of the positivities and things. Or if there's somebody who maybe is struggling to think critically about things, they have to consider the data, etc. It's a good way of framing things. Similarly related is allowing for different styles. So different people benefit from working in different ways, whether it can be their willingness to put forward an idea, but it can also just be when they do their kind of best thinking or working, that's not in a workshop for everyone, or it's not on camera or over video. So what I've done here with the board is, I've made it ahead of time. There are instructions, and I've explained the activity. Obviously, I'm presenting it to you today, but if this was an actual workshop, what I could have done and what I would advise doing is share it ahead of the session. So you can say, okay, on Thursday, we're going to be doing this. the questions and the topics are in there. If you prefer, you can look at it ahead of time. You can have time to think it through. You can have time to add your contribution outside of the session if you prefer, etc. And equally, sometimes if you know there are people kind of within your team and group who benefit from having time to think things over before they make a decision, you can build that in as well. So you can say, okay, we're going to gather all of the input, and then we're going to look at this again tomorrow and make a decision. Like just build that in and be a good facilitator. And then you can also make sure that everybody has an allocated contribution. So if you're balancing, I would do this if you are balancing like senior stakeholders, or if you've got quite a big team, or if you know that there are certain team members who are less likely to engage with this, you might, if you wanted to, you could create, a bunch of different, I've done this before, a bunch of different post-its, and you allocate them. So I have my green post-its, they're mine. I have to fill those with my ideas, and I have yellows and they're other Laura's, and then maybe there's pink and they belong to third Laura's. Nice and confusing. But just by kind of pre-populating in this way, everybody has an allocated contribution, and that tends to encourage people to put forward more than maybe they would if that's not their natural tendency. And I've said it a few times, but anonymized input. So you don't have to, but there are tools within Miro and Mural, and I'm sure on other platforms as well, there are tools for allowing this to be anonymous if you think that benefits participants. It's not always necessary, but it's really easily done if it would be helpful. Countering negativity. So again, yeah, people who are maybe kind of a really negative presence in the group, or beyond that, maybe they're being very pessimistic or very critical of other contributions. This is a nice tool called Yes And, which you've maybe all heard before, but I would normally communicate this as part of the kind of the agreement or house rules in the beginning of the session, or if necessary, I would share it with people during, and say, okay, rather than we're going to agree that instead of being critical or focusing on the limitations or the flaws in a particular idea, we are instead going to say yes and. So nobody's going to say no, we're going to say yes and. And so you kind of focus on how you can improve or build upon the contributions of the other people in the group rather than what's wrong with them. And the 6 hats, again, is a good one for that. Then I just wanted to briefly mention tools and platforms. So I'm just listing them here so that you can refer to them. But this is Mural that we're using here. I like Mural because it is free and everybody can access it individually. This is what I've built on. But there's also Miro, which I know a lot of designers are on, and it has very, very similar functionality to this. There's Jamboard, there's FigJam, there's others, but they're all basically whiteboard and post-it type tools, which is perfect for all of the activities that I've shared. You can also do it with actual post-its. So if you're fortunate enough to be in a physical environment with all of your team, you can use physical post-its and Sharpies, whiteboards, etc., which can be nice too. If you do conduct activities in physical post-its, or you're combining the two, some of these, so Mural and Miro, for example, have the capability to actually be able to scan and upload pictures of post-its and cross-reference them into the activity as well, which is really nice. It saves you a lot of typing. And then tips for the facilitator we've already included, and I will add to. As I mentioned before, I will incorporate the questions and answers that have already been asked into this Mural so that you can refer to it, and I will share the Mural with the group. But that is all that I had to share for now on the activities, and to move on to the Q&A.
Cool. Well, we don't have anything in the chat, so I think maybe we can, I said at the beginning we were going to be moving over into the Slack channel so that we can make sure that we're sort of facilitating for other people that weren't also able to join the event. But thank you so much. I'm going to try and be a bit cheeky and give you just one last question from myself. So I'm just wondering what kind of key, out of all of that, what do you think a kind of key piece of advice you'd give to someone that's just starting off in facilitation, or that you would have given to your kind of younger self?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say don't over egg it, which I know is ironic because I have made this very really quite high fidelity compared to my other murals. In fact, what I will do, I'll show you what some of the others look like, and you'll see I'm an absolute fraud. Here you go. So here's what an assumptions mapping looks like. For example, I would just do some arrows, right? And I'll populate them with some post-its. I'll color code things and get people to integrate them, like I said, but it doesn't have to be major. It can be really simple. You can just draw 2 lines. The point is to get everybody involved. And I would say this is where to start these matrices, because they're so easy and they're so relative. You know, everybody can kind of, once you start running the session, can grasp quite quickly, okay, yeah, this is higher than this is higher than that. And yeah, it surprises me how often we have a jumble of tasks or challenges, you know, that we aren't able to kind of break down into a prioritization. And this is how we do that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for joining. I hope you have taken kind of a few things away from this that you can start to use when you're facilitating your own sessions. Thank you to both Lauras. And I hope that everyone has a lovely evening or day, depending on where you've joined from, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. See you on Slack.